Hello, I'm Mrs. Karaz. This is Chapter 1, Roots of the American People, and today we're going to look at Section 1, the Earliest Americans. So, the first Americans came to our country long before records were kept, which means that we're not exactly certain how they got here. And there are a few different theories on how they might have gotten from other lands to the Americas. One of the most popular theories is the land bridge theory. And it's based on the idea that 10,000 to 100,000 years ago, much of the world was covered in glaciers. As the glaciers formed, the water level dropped, and it exposed land that was otherwise covered by shallow water. So there's a piece of land that today is covered by shallow water called the Bering Strait. It is right here in the dark green on your map. And it stretches between Siberia and Alaska. So according to the land bridge theory, maybe when that land was exposed, people walked across the Bering Strait from Siberia into Alaska and therefore into North America. There are other theories, of course. The coastal route theory suggests that people in Asia used boats to cross over into North America. And then each Native American tribe has its own legend about how people came to settle here in North America. We'll look at some of those together in class. So moving on to some of the habits and ways of life of early Native Americans, or early Americans, I should say. Native Americans hunted large animals and used them for food, furs. They even used their bones to make tools. But if Native Americans were hunting these very large animals who moved around, Native Americans themselves had to have nomadic lifestyles, which means that they had to travel from place to place following their source for food. They couldn't settle down in one location. But eventually, from overhunting, larger animals began to die out, so Native Americans had to change their way of life. They were still nomadic, and now they hunted small animals and searched for wild plants that grew in nature. This was known as hunting and gathering. 8,000 years ago, though, a big change happened. Native Americans began planting and growing their own crops, farming for themselves. And since they no longer had to search to find food, they were growing their own food in a stable location. Farming allowed Native Americans to settle down in one place. They no longer had to move around in search of food. Another thing that made life easier for Native Americans were methods of irrigation. Irrigation is a way of transporting water from rivers to drier areas, and it was used to help water crops and make sure that their crops would thrive. Farmers also learned to raise their own livestock, aka animals that are intended for being eaten. And farming also enabled Native Americans to have a surplus of food. When you have a surplus of something, that means you have more than you need to survive. When you have a surplus, you can use it for trading, you could store it for future use, and food was also used in religious ceremonies, thanks to this surplus. Okay, so now that we're settled in one place, we have the start of early civilizations. A civilization is an advanced culture in which people develop cities, science, and industries. Civilized people don't just simply survive. They make advances that will help future generations. And farming is one of those things that make more civilizations possible, right? You don't need to be hunting food and wondering where your food source will be. You have what you need to get by. So many early civilizations and cultures were polytheistic. This means that they worship more than one god. And there are three major early civilizations formed in the Americas that we're going to look at right now quickly. The Mayas, the Aztecs, and Incas. So the Mayas, and if you can hear panting, that's my dog Ham sitting here being pet. They arose in 250 AD in what is now Mexico and Central America. They built large cities that featured pyramids, temples, ball courts, and palaces. So we're seeing, right, a palace or a place to play ball. That's not stuff you need to survive. We're seeing advanced civilization here. And in that vein, they developed arts, a system of government, and a written language. The Mayas created a calendar based on astronomy, aka the observation of the stars. They carved stories of their history and their religious beliefs. But in 900 AD, they declined for unknown reasons. Mayas began to abandon their cities, maybe because of disease or overpopulation. Historians are not 100% sure. The Aztecs arose around 900 AD when the Mayas declined. They built a strong capital city called Tenochtitlan, which is in present-day Mexico City. It was built on a series of islands in a great lake. There were stone roads connecting the city to the mainland. And there the farmers raised crops on floating platforms. The city center held temples to many Aztec gods. Aztecs believed that their own success depended on the will of the gods. So we have kind of divine control playing a big role in their culture. During the 1400s, Aztec armies conquered most of present-day Mexico. Aztecs were harsh rulers, demanding that goods and taxes were sent to Tenochtitlan, and eventually this just really made their subjects angry. People who had been conquered by the Aztecs turned on them, and that helped lead to the Aztecs' downfall. And last but certainly not least, we have the Incas. They were the world's largest empire in the 1400s, controlling large parts of South America. Their capital city, Cuzco, yes, from the emperor's new clothes, was connected to other cities by a series of roads. They constructed buildings of huge stones carefully structured to fit together. Their engineers built walls, canals, and bridges. They produced fine weavings and metalwork, and rulers wore gold and silver jewelry. So that wraps us up on early Americans. We're seeing a shift from survival mode to civilization mode, which will play a big part for us in the future. That's it. Bye, guys.